Welcome, I'm Bob Tichelman, a Principal Technical Trainer here at Microsoft, and joining me for this series is my co-presenter from Anthropic.
Hi, I'm Charu from Anthropic, and I'm glad you're here. Together, we're going to take you from I have heard of Claude to I just made my first request to Claude on Microsoft Foundry.
Microsoft has been building AI into the platform for over a decade. At Ignite 2025, Azure Foundry became Microsoft Foundry, a first-class platform alongside Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Fabric, our AI app and agent factory. As part of that step, Anthropic's Claude models are now native options inside of Foundry. And it goes beyond Foundry. Claude is showing up in the Microsoft AI stack, in Microsoft 365 Copilot, Copilot Studio, and GitHub Copilot, and in agent experiences like Researcher and Excel Agent Mode.
Claude is Anthropic's family of frontier models that are built for reasoning through complex problems, for writing and reviewing code, and for working with very long documents, and also powering agents that take a goal and work through it step by step. On Foundry, you get the same Claude that we ship everywhere, the same models, the same messages API, the same SDKs, all of them running inside your Azure tenant with Azure Billing, Azure Identity, and Azure Monitoring.
Let's take a look at how this comes together inside Microsoft Foundry and get you set up to create your first request with Claude. Everything that we'll be talking about, models, prompting, tools, data, and agents come together in Microsoft Foundry, not as an isolated feature, but as a unified platform.
Importantly, this includes multiple frontier models so developers can choose the right model for the right job. Now, in the Microsoft Foundry model catalog, we've included a number of Claude models that bring strength in reasoning, planning, and long-running workflows, and Foundry provides the environment to operationalize those capabilities.
And with Foundry, you can deploy models including Claude and others, access APIs and endpoints for integration, evaluate outputs and refine behaviors, connect to enterprise data and services, and orchestrate everything into working applications, all within a governed, enterprise-ready platform. Let's take a quick tour of Microsoft Foundry. Microsoft Foundry offers two ways to build AI. The portal is a simple web-based dashboard where you can explore and experiment with code. Azure CLI and VS Code, which are full developer environments where you can move from clicking to building, writing code. The portal is like using a microwave to quickly create something powerful, where VS Code is like stepping into a full kitchen with complete control. There are numerous examples of how to use both of these on the Microsoft documentation site. This example can be found at a short link, aka.ms/Foundry Portal Demo. Here you can see we have both pathways well documented by selecting the method that you like to use.
For our demos, we'll be using the Microsoft Foundry portal. Currently, Microsoft is offering two versions of the portal, and for simplicity and time, we'll be using the new portal. Once we have authenticated, we'll be presented with any of the projects that we've already created. Once we've selected a project, you will see key information like the API key, the project endpoint, and Azure OpenAI endpoint. Focusing on the upper right and selecting Discover, you will be able to discover a wide variety of offerings in the area of the available models, agents, tools, as well as pre-built solution templates. Moving on to build, we now can see the specific resources that have been created inside of this project, such as agents, models, fine-tune, tools, knowledge, data, evaluations, and guardrails. Next up is operate, where we can get an overall view and filter assets like agents, models, and tools. Compliance for policies, guardrails, security posture, and data security and governance. We can look at quotas such as token per minute and provision throughput units. And finally, admin. Just a quick side note that this is one of the locations that you can delete a project if you ever need to. Okay, That is just a brief overview of some of the things that you can do with Microsoft Foundry and a brief overview of the Foundry new portal experience. Before you deploy AI in Foundry, you have to choose your model. And it's worth choosing thoughtfully because more intelligent models often cost more.
So, Charu, walk us through the lineup.
So as of May 2025, there are 3 tiers of Claude models that are generally available: Opus, Sonnet, and Haiku. Opus is the most capable model. It is built for hard problems like multi-step reasoning, sophisticated agents, complex code work, and financial and security analysis. It typically runs slower and costs more, but it is often worth it when the task is difficult. The second is Sonnet, which is a workhorse. It delivers frontier-level intelligence, but at production speed and production cost, and for most teams, that's actually a good starting point. And then finally, we have Haiku. Haiku is built for speed and volume. It is used for tasks like classification, extraction, routing, and sub-agents inside a larger system. When you're making thousands of calls and each one is simple, Haiku is probably the right tool to use.
And how should you decide which one to use?
You should start with Haiku. You should take 20 or 30 examples from your real workload, run them through that model, and look at the results. If you're happy with the quality, great, you're done and you've avoided overpaying. But if a particular task hits a quality ceiling, step that one up to a Sonnet and then to an Opus if needed.
And in Foundry, you'll find all 3 of these tiers in the model catalog, including legacy models. They share the same messaging APIs, so swapping between them later is one line change in your code. You can also use the model catalog to compare models on a variety of attributes to help you select the most appropriate model.
We're excited that new versions of Claude models will continue to be available in Foundry as they are ready for release. On Foundry, the latest Opus and Sonnet models also support a 1 million context window.
Let's take a look at the models in the portal and make a comparison. The Compare Model feature in Microsoft Foundry allows you to evaluate multiple AI models side by evaluating differences in their responses across key dimensions, such as quality, which is how accurate and useful the output is, performance, which is speed and responsiveness, safety, which is how well the model handles risky or inappropriate content, and cost, which is how much it takes to run at scale, helping you make informed, real-world decisions about which model best fits your specific scenario. Let's load up the 3 models that we just talked about and see what the catalog has to say about them. I won't be going into the definition of the industry standard metrics of quality and safety, but it's easily located if you want to. You can also get more details on each model if you want. Once you know which model you want, the next thing is to make sure Foundry is ready to host it. Before we can deploy Claude, we need something for it to live in. Microsoft Foundry uses a multi-level approach to build a solution. It starts with an Azure subscription, which sets the billing construct and default access control. Next, we have a Foundry resource, which is the underlying Azure service container that provides the infrastructure, endpoints, and access to models. And then we have the project, or in some legacy cases, a hub project, which is where you actually have the built-in features. So you have Azure subscriptions that have a Foundry resource, which is the platform infrastructure. You get projects, which then host models, agents, data and knowledge, and tools and connectors.
But before you click anything, there are a few prerequisites.
We've got a short checklist to help you out. First, you'll need an Azure subscription with active billing. Free trials, student subscriptions, and pay-as-you-go sponsorships aren't currently supported for Claude. To run requests, your subscription currently needs to be an Enterprise Agreement, or EA, or an MCA-E, which is where the request quotas live. Secondly, you'll need contributor or owner on the resource group, plus permissions to subscribe to offers in the Azure Marketplace, since billing for Claude flows through the Marketplace into your Azure invoice. As always, Microsoft recommends least privilege when assigning roles. Third, you'll create your project in a supported region. Check the documentation for the latest.
If any of this gives you pause, have a quick conversation with whoever manages your Azure tenant before going further. Let's check the Azure portal for those foundation resources of a subscription and a resource group and the necessary access control to them. Bob has located a subscription that needs the billing requirements that we previously mentioned of being either an enterprise agreement or MCSE that has been provisioned properly to bill Claude model usage.
I'm going to check the RBAC permissions that we have here, and you'll see that the necessary permissions that we've previously mentioned. Remember, the Microsoft recommended practices of least privilege and group assignment as opposed to individual accounts.
For this video, Bob has already created a resource group that will host the Foundry resource.
And I want to show you that the defaults have inherited its security settings from the parent object, in this case, the subscription.
Now that we have that confirmed, let's go back to the Microsoft Foundry portal. You can get there through the waffle menu or by going directly to ai.azure.com. If you don't have an existing project, you can create a new one by going to Operate, Admin, Create Project. Give the project a name, and we would suggest selecting the advanced option specifically to confirm the correct subscription and region. At the time of this recording, it is available in US East 2 and Sweden Central. Confirm that the option for Foundry to create the underlying resource for you is automatically enabled. Then select Create. This can sometimes take a few minutes. That resource is what your endpoint URL and your API keys will hang off of.
We have a Foundry resource, so now we can deploy a model. In Foundry, a deployment is a specific Claude model with its own name, type, and endpoint. Let's create one. The deployment name defaults to the model ID and the model name, and unless you have a reason to change it, I'd keep it that way.
The last point is worth underlining if you've used the standard Claude API. On the Claude API, the model parameter is the model ID. On Foundry, model is your deployment's name. The two are often the same string, but they don't always have to be.
And it's live.
Which means somewhere in East US 2, Claude is ready and waiting for you to ask it something.
Now let's confirm everything works. Foundry has a built-in playground. I'm going to type an example of something I can put in there, and let's see what the response is.
That's Claude answering you through your Azure endpoint. The last step is to do the same thing from code.
On the right, you'll see the code samples. The endpoint looks something like this. That's your base URL. Then there's your API keys. Treat it the way you would treat any credentials. You want to make sure that you store it securely, either in environmental variables or in key vaults, and keep it out of your source code and version control.
API keys are the fastest way to get started. For production, Foundry also supports Microsoft Entra ID, which is keyless authentication. Your Azure identity is the credential with role-based access control on top and no secret for anyone to leak. We'll use the API key today because it gets you moving fastest.
We have an endpoint, a key, and a working deployment. So now we can write some code. We'll use Python here, and the same pattern is available in TypeScript, C#, Java, and PHP. Anthropic's SDKs all include a Foundry-aware client.
Three things are happening here. We import Anthropic Foundry, the client class that knows how to talk to your Azure endpoint. We call messages.create with a model, which is your deployment name, a max tokens limit, and a list of messages, which is the shape of every request you'll ever make. And model is your deployment name. This pattern looks similar in other clients' SDKs like C#, TypeScript, Java, and PHP.
And the final line simply pulls the text out of the Claude's reply and prints it. And there's the response.
Look at the usage object too. Every response reports input and output tokens, which gives you a cost meter on every call. Track it from request 1, and hopefully you'll not be surprised by your bill.
From here, the whole Claude API is available to you. Streaming, tool use, vision, extended thinking, agents, all of it works through the same Foundry endpoint with the same client.
We went from what is Claude to a working request on Foundry in your own tenant in just a few steps. Take it from here and build something with it.
A quick recap. We covered what Microsoft Foundry provides, where Claude fits, and how to set up your Foundry resources and deploy a Claude model. That's the Getting Started map.
The important thing is to start with a practical use case, choose the right model for the job, and evaluate what you build as you go. These habits matter more than any single demo.
If you want to keep learning, head to AI Skills Navigator and look for the Microsoft plus Anthropic learning path. It picks up where this session ends and gives you a deeper way to build on what you saw here.
And if you're building in this space, the best next step is to keep experimenting. The patterns are learnable, and the more you practice, the faster this becomes a development skill.
Thanks for being here.